really lack of clarity that came with the documentation from the state. And so we really appreciate that Fletcher Tove and Jessica Silver and Tim Love are with us from the county to answer your questions and to help navigate this difficult situation. I'm also joined by Kathy Peterson from the Explore Asheville team, who received and organized all of your questions. The ones that were received will be answered as part of the program, and then we invite you to add additional questions to the chat. We also have Beth McKinney with us, who is our sales manager who supports the weddings industry, and she'll have a few words to say to connect with you later in the program too. So with that, I'll turn it over to our friends and colleagues from Buncombe County.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. We found that throughout this whole process, these town forums, community talks are really helpful kind of to digest the state's guidance and our local interpretation of the guidance. So really glad to be with you guys, walk through, try to read between the lines on what the guidance says, what it doesn't say, and how to interpret it. Can we go ahead and go to the next slide? So just generally talk about where we are right now. We're still in phase 2. Current orders set to expire on the 26th of June. I just want to remind everyone that Governor Cooper gave us indication that early next week we'll be getting some information about where he's going from here. We don't get any kind of more heads up than the general public does on what to expect from the state. So we know our numbers across the state right now are not meeting the thresholds for metrics that the state wanted to see to continue proceeding to phase 3. It doesn't mean we won't go to it. It doesn't mean we won't do like a modified phase 2 modified or 2.5 or stay right where we are or even go backwards. We just really don't have an idea right now. I can tell you locally, we are at 463 cases with 36 deaths for COVID. Our numbers are definitely going up, but what we can see is we think they're going up locally in a relatively controlled manner. We're in that 4 to 6 week window of going to phase 2. We're really starting to see the effects. So what we're waiting to see is that will this continue to be a controlled, gradual plateau of cases, which we were expecting with reopening, or is this going to get to a point where it starts to run away from us, which is our big concern about overwhelming healthcare systems. So back to where we are in phase 2, just a quick overview. We're no longer in that stay-home guidance. We have specific restrictions for mass gathering, being 10 people indoors, 25 people outdoors for those events listed on the screen. No restaurants and other things are at 50% capacity. And then there were in Section 8 of the Governor's Executive Order 141, there are specific closures for sectors of business. Through all this, just to reemphasize, we're asking everybody to always, whether you're working or not, to practice the 3 W's, wear some sort of face covering when you're out in public, wait 6 feet apart and avoid close contact whenever possible when you're out, and wash your hands with increased frequency, either with soap and water or hand sanitizer. Go ahead and kick us on to our next slide. So talk through specific guidance for the wedding industry. My sister-in-law is she's a florist down in Transylvania County. She's very associated with this. Her whole year's kind of been wiped out. Hopefully they reschedule stuff, so I understand the impacts of this directly on this economy and how it creates some very unique challenges, specifically when you're trying to get groups of people together and work through all this guidance. So the governor differentiates between ceremonies and receptions, and you can read this in the FAQ, the frequently asked questions document that came with Executive Order number 141, and I can help push this out. But I'm going to read exactly what the governor's order says in regard between ceremonies and receptions. So, are weddings and funerals allowed to be held in phase 2? Yes. Even though there's no mass gathering cap on the people who may attend a wedding or funeral ceremony, Receptions or visitations before or after weddings and funerals are subject to the mass gathering limit. Individuals are encouraged to follow the 3 Ws to reduce the chance of spreading COVID-19. So when I read that, this specific ceremony has an exemption under the orders as a First Amendment, religious freedom, other things, but there's no guidelines or capacity on the wedding ceremony itself. But what it does say is when you're talking about the reception or visitations before or after, it's applicable to the mass gathering limits of 10 people indoors or 25 people outdoors. We know there is guidance specifically for restaurants where they could operate at 50% capacity, and some venues have basically have a restaurant on site that's certified through the health department, and you guys can operate under that restaurant guidance for 50% capacity. So again, I'm going to follow up with some more direct language from the governor's order on the next slide, but just want to make that very clear that the ceremony itself is allowed, no restrictions on size. We do ask people to practice the 3 Ws, but before or after, it's very clear that that reverts back to mass gathering guidance. So think about the reception and things afterwards. So I want to cite this again from the governor's order 141, section 8, the orders of closure. So entertainment and fitness facilities says, they're ordered to remain closed. And then in section 2 says these in this subsection are not, but not limited to, are on there. And I see that highlighted item. It says venues for receptions or parties. So some of you guys are specifically your sole purpose is venues for receptions or parties. And as we read through this from the state's orders, it's very clear that those solely purposed are restricted in this subsection. And then the next slide. And then I'll walk through this. Jessica, do you want to walk through this, or do you want me to walk through it?
Sure. So if you are from as a food service and
Jessica, you're a little broken up. Can you check your settings?
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, so much better.
Okay. So the rest
you dropped out again.
I'm so sorry.
You're perfect right now.
Let me see if I can. Okay. All right, let me just stand just like this. Restaurants are required to maintain 6 feet of separation between parties, whether you're indoors or outdoors, and that 6 feet isn't. It's a 6-foot perimeter around each person. Restaurants are allowed to operate at 50% capacity, or 12 people per 1,000 square feet. It just depends on whichever one gives you the least amount of people. That's the one you're supposed to use between those two options. Restaurants should also post the emergency maximum capacity signs, and we do have those available for you at Buncombe Ready. We should also post the signage around social distancing that includes the 3 Ws, but just referenced. And also mark 6 feet intervals in areas of high traffic. So think about entrances to doorways, waiting areas, or at counters, bar areas would need to have the 6-foot markers. With regards to cleaning and hygiene, everyone should take up their cleaning and hygiene practices a notch. They encourage routine hand washing and using hand sanitizer, even for the clients or patrons of restaurants. And restaurants should be practicing routine cleaning and disinfection of high contact surfaces, paying close attention to doorknobs, doors, light switches, um, the backs of chairs, for instance, anything that's a high contact surface. Restaurants should also screen their employees daily once they report to work, and also post signage and informing your employees and your patrons not to enter your building if they are symptomatic. And if you should have an employee who is symptomatic, go ahead and separate them from the rest of your employees. Hopefully everybody heard the rest of that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm just going to work through some of the questions we received. So as a venue, how can we ensure that our event staff stays protected when working an event? So the best tools we all have that everybody can do is, again, the face coverings, maintaining distance where possible, and washing your hands with increased frequency. Other than that, if you're one of these places that can't operate or will operate in the future, really you as a restaurant, you have to require to screen as staff comes in. So that goes beyond just taking temperature. That also means asking some symptomatic questions, and we have resources for that. But not if people are coming to work sick, sending them home. If people become symptomatic on the job, like if they come in fine for a shift, and then throughout the course of the evening, the event, they're not feeling so well, this is not the time to have them tough out a shift. You tell them to just isolate themselves immediately, go take themselves home. That's really isolating and sending people who are symptomatic home, and then the 3 W's are really the best things we can do right now to stay protected. So restrictions and requirements you must meet. We're not asking people to take the temperature of guests, but we would recommend the organizers if you can have communications with them beforehand, tell them they should be self-screening, staying home if they're sick, whether that's done through you guys or the people hosting the events. Just make it very clear that if you're sick, we know weddings are a big deal, but you don't want to come, because we see it in the news all the time across the country. People coming to a wedding or a funeral, and one person will end up, 20, 40, 80 people catching COVID. Food and beverage service, Jessica might want to jump in on that one later, but we're trying to get rid of any self-service. So in the county order, there's no self-service, so that you might have to modify things for there. We don't want buffet lines, so maybe things are coming individually sized and wrapped, or servers are having to deliver those. We're trying to get rid of whether it's a kind of buffet layout or some kind of self-serve, like a strawberry chocolate fountain kind of thing I've seen at weddings, or that communal fondue kind of fountain, something like that. Trying to get rid of all that stuff. So it's individual servings, not self-serve. So asking guests to complete a symptom questionnaire, I think, is feasible and a great precautionary step. If you haven't seen it, Buncombe County has a COVID-19 self-checker that if you refer to. There's also lots of resources we could push out, but there's other online if you want printed out paper versions. Some of them are very simple and just a couple, like 4 or 5 questions. The one online we have, and some other ones get more in depth about symptoms and medical history. But that's a great idea. And whether it's be through you guys as the organizers, or encouraging the families involved in the wedding to push it out to their guests independently. I don't know how that would work best, but that would really be the best way. That proactive communication is so vital in all of this. Let people know if they're sick, don't show up, or what precautions you're expecting of them to take before they show up. And that same thing about family style service, that's just so prime for sharing utensils, sharing that stuff around a table or at a buffet. So we're not permitting that in the county. So whether you have to individually plate it and have servers bring it out like a traditional sit down restaurant, or find other solutions, but we don't want people coming up or at a table having a communal tray where they're passing utensils, things like that. Next slide. So here again, those questions about capacity. So if you are a venue that is not just a venue that probably meets the restaurant requirements, or for some reason is allowed to operate under current guidance, again, if you co-host the ceremonies and the receptions, the ceremony has no limits on restrictions per the governor's order. There's exemption from all of the order. Post ceremony, receptions, events, meetings fall under that mass gathering guidance of 10 inside or 25 outside. There is a caveat to that if you have multiple rooms in a building, you could put 10 in each room. If you have multiple spaces on grounds where you can kind of like define and separate, you can have multiple groups of 25 at different places, but you can't have a defined area with more than 25 outside or 10 inside in a room. And yes, it's not just the guest count, it's everyone. So, everybody, you gotta remember the fundamental reason behind this. We're not trying to make people's business difficult. We're not trying to, have these complex equations. The fundamental reason is when we have these mass gatherings, if somebody was symptomatic or spreading COVID, we're trying to contain that spread. So yeah, anybody who's there is breathing counts towards that head count. So it does include staff and vendors. And then since people are trying to do their 200-person ceremonies and tented, so there were some questions before about tents. Tents, as long as they're open-sided, do not count as being inside. 200-person ceremony, again, the state's order is written so that 200-person, there's no limit. So you could have 200, you could have 300 on the ceremony itself, but for the reception, after the ceremony, that restriction would be applied to mass gathering guidance. And again, we may get indication early next week that some of that guidance may change. We don't know until we hear it from the state. Yeah, no guidance on the square footage there. Yeah, so that's a great question. So when we're doing all this stuff at restaurants or in general public, when we're saying 6 feet, you can have a household, as like not a household like extended family, but people living in the same household, sitting closer together than 6 feet, and then between those individual units have 6 feet. So you could have a family at a table, and they're 6 feet between another family at a table. That's fine. Same thing. We've had some questions about people asking for kind of like a picnic kind of layout, or like being outside and having blankets. Like on a blanket, you could have a whole family unit together, but you want the 6 feet between those nuclear family units. Yeah, so cocktail hours. The whole idea of all this, again, was trying to prevent that mingling. So they can mingle, but everybody should have a 6 foot kind of, or couples or families should try to keep that 6 feet distance. We're asking to wear masks. Obviously, probably the bridal or the wedding party itself probably wouldn't be wearing those during ceremony. But as you guys are out at the reception, when you're not eating or drinking, the recommendation is wear a mask, maintain 6 feet distance, and wash your hands and practice good hygiene. No difference in that guidance between indoor and outdoor.
Just maybe I'm just wondering whether you would think it's a good idea for a reception to be seated.
That would be a great way to kind of limit people from mingling and crossing people that 6 foot barrier. Yeah, maybe having it seated can restrict that kind of movement so people aren't flowing and mingling. Putting up signage, marking floors. So like if people are going up somewhere to get drinks or some kind of event at the ceremony or event, if you can mark off distances so people know what 6 feet is when they look, and mark out social areas with 6 feet. I've seen lots of questions also about dance floors. Mark out 6 feet on the dance floor. It's just that's the 3 W's is really fundamental in all this: the 6 feet distance, wear face covering, and washing hands. And the last question on that screen: common aspects of wedding receptions. Yeah, involve close, prolonged contact between guests. That's the big heartburn we have from public health is we understand there's no restrictions on the ceremonies themselves, but afterwards, people are gonna the traditional dances with the bride and groom, all the wedding photos, all the different events, all the mingling and socializing. It's hard to tell people such a traditional and important event in someone's lives that you're going to have to limit it or do it differently. But we really need to, again, the fundamental purpose we have all this is to protect not just the people at that event, but the entire community. When those people return to whether it's in the local community or back to where they come from, that they're not contracting it at a congregation, a meeting of people, and then bringing it back out to community and just furthering the spread. So just please keep that in the back of your minds as we're giving all these recommendations and interpreting the state's guidance, is that the fundamental reason behind all this is keeping the general public, the community safe.
Fletch, this is Kathy. The question about the photo booths that's in there, I mean, I imagine that the photo booths that we're all used to seeing that have the props and the funny hats and all that kind of stuff would not be a recommended thing because of all the touching that people would encounter with all these props.
Yeah, I would definitely not recommend that because you're in traditionally the ones I've seen is like mimicking an old photo booth, very small love seat, people to sit on. The props is just like a serving utensil. If you're gonna have dozens of people touching it, I would recommend against that. If you were gonna do it, you have to sanitize it in totally between every individual shoot. It's a big concern. That's like a prime suspect for people, in a small enclosed space, breathing, laughing, and taking pictures, swapping out. So my recommendation would be not to do those photo booths or any other thing where you have random people mixing between family units in a small space.
And I think I'm kind of envisioning, when you're like evaluating, the very first thing you start with is, am I a restaurant or am I a venue?
Right.
Right. And the guidance is very clear in the governor's order that if I'm a restaurant, yes, then I move to the distancing requirements, the capacity requirements, the sanitation requirements. If I'm a venue, then I'm, basically stopping at that point. And it seems to me that what's inherent in the intention of the order is that in a restaurant, it's implied that you're seated. Right. Yeah. So I don't want to bring that in, but I'm feeling like there's not a ton of clarity around that yet. So I just wanted to throw that out to be checked on.
And one concern is that some people will be looking to hold these events at restaurants since they have some capacity and allowed to operate. Just because you're allowed to do a reception and using the restaurant guidance for numbers and operations doesn't necessarily mean that we want people at night at a restaurant converting it into a venue, like creating a dance floor and bringing all this stuff that would traditionally be at a venue to the restaurant setting. If you're there operating on a restaurant guidance, it needs to be set up and operating as a restaurant, following their pretty strict guidance from the state. Do we have another slide of questions? Yeah, so none of us have crystal balls, but we know, we can say with great certainty that we'll be dealing with COVID-19 well into 2021, probably beyond. To what extent, we don't know. If people want to wait, if people are expecting the full this is, I mean, this isn't public health guidance. This is just kind of messaging. If people are expecting the full traditional wedding kind of stuff, and as you're trying to explain to them all the restrictions, the uncertainty, we don't know next week whether we're going to become more restrictive on our guidance, and this might change everything I just told you guys, or it's going to kind of stay the same. Recommending people to delay that to next year or have modified like ceremonies and then save the reception for later in time where we have more certainty and can have a more traditional, big event. That's really for you guys to determine, but what I can tell you is that this is novel. It changes, the guidance changes consistently. Our trends change week to week. I can't give, same with other industries and sectors we talk to, I can't read the future. We don't know what things are going to look like at the end of June, let alone, the end of the summer. So rescheduling is a great option. If you can convince people to do that when there's more certainty and they'll have, more options. I'm skeptical that the governor is going to allow for larger gatherings with his next iteration of his order. I don't think we would see that maybe until the fall when we have a better idea what our numbers are doing. If he did, if say the governor said, outside we're going from 25 to 50, there's a good chance that the county will have a discussion and decide to stay at 25. Just because the way our numbers are going, I don't know. We have to wait to see what the governor does, but we always have the right to be more restrictive than the state if we think it's in the best interest of the county. So, but I'm skeptical that at the end of June, the governor is going to allow for larger gatherings, but he may, I don't know. And then again, phase 3, kind of in the dark right now. Because what we do know is we know the metrics that the state's looking at. We know the metrics we're looking at. We know what the state numbers are and our local numbers are. Most of our trends are going in the wrong direction. So, some of them are okay, but from what the state put out earlier, it doesn't seem like they're meeting their own criteria for going to phase 3. So I would be skeptical we go to phase 3. I would expect maybe like stay where we are and modify phase 2. And there is a possibility we would go back to like a modified phase 1. I really just don't know right now. Hopefully getting some more insight early next week. Next slide. If anybody wants to chime in and address anything else I left out, I'm happy to do that. And then if you guys want to guide it, we can start working on the chat questions.
Yeah, I think going to the questions in the chat is a good start. The first one that we got was, is a country club classified as a restaurant because they do have food service, or are they an event venue, or both? How's a country club classified?
Yeah, so I'll let Jessica might have some further insight into this, but if you're trying to use a country club for a wedding and you want to operate under the restaurant guidance, you need to be working through the restaurant line of operations of that, using the restaurant. You can't have it at the country club generally and just say, we're using restaurant guidance because it's a country club. I'm assuming most of these country clubs have this certified restaurant that gets a inspection from environmental health department for certification. So they're both, but if you're using it for that guidance, you go through the restaurant guidance. Jessica, you have anything to add to that?
Right. And sure, if you all have any questions about specific locations, you can feel free to call our office, and we'll be able to look that information up for you if you have specific questions about locations. But if a country club holds a restaurant or food service establishment permit, then they will be able to operate following the restaurant guidelines in this space.
Okay, next question. I guess Eleanor Campbell asked this. I'll answer it. So Eleanor asked that, since Western North Carolina is a top wedding destination, and since we have low numbers of infection, could the CVB lobby the governor to treat our region differently from the rest of the state in terms of reopening? So, I mean, I'll kick that off. I mean, our role has been to be a partner with health officials in kind of advocating and informing how the industry works, and then also supporting, the database safety decisions that are being made. I can tell you that politically, I don't think there would be any pathway for the governor to carve out any exceptions. And I think Fletcher would say that our numbers are not that low. And then I'll turn this over to Tim and Fletcher and say that if anyone was successful in doing that on the state level, I suspect that the county would exercise their right to make things more restrictive and probably would, not support that kind of approach. But I'll turn it over to you guys to comment further.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick, Fletch. This is Tim Love, and thank you, Stephanie, for that. And I just want everyone to understand that our goal at the county or state level is not to prohibit your business or to do anything of that nature. And, our goal most recently has been to align as closely as we can to the governor's order. But as a county government or a municipal government, we do have the ability to be more restrictive. And the facts of the matter, just to be very honest, is that mass gatherings are some of the riskiest things we can possibly do. And I just want to be very honest about that. You're bringing lots of people together from different locations, different ages, different risk factors. There's a natural inclination for folks to want to talk and mingle and share. And so we understand that. That's all natural. But that doesn't change the facts. And if you do additional research on your own, which I'm sure you have, some of the greatest ways that COVID is spread is through simply talking to others in close proximity for long periods of time, which is exactly a mass gathering. So with that said, Fletch, feel free to chime in, but I think we would have to look at that very closely if there was a change, and we'll just see.
Yeah, again, thank you, Stephanie. That was a great way of answering that question, and Tim. But yeah, our numbers aren't really low. Buncombe County and Hendersonville, so maybe some of the neighboring smaller counties have relatively low numbers. But just as important than that is the trajectory. We're seeing a large increase recently, and we're just still waiting to see whether it's controllable, it's going to stay within limits, or it's going to kind of run away from us. So, and that's one of the big concerns we uniquely have with Asheville is we are a tourist destination for not just weddings, but all kinds of tourism. So it's just an increased risk of having, as those people come in, bringing it in and taking it back to their communities and the transient tourist population we have here.
Yeah, I'm sure that, many of the people on this call are also affiliated with, restaurants and breweries and other kinds of venues that are, and are dealing with, all of the additional issues related to, trying to get people to comply, with wearing a mask and all of the things that, are likely to end this, sooner rather than never. And so, boy, our hearts are broken really for, all of you and everybody else. Hotels have extra restrictions, entertainment facilities are not allowed to operate, museums are closed. We share this frustration, and I wish there was more that could be done that would help get us back to business. But I just think the only thing that will help get us back to business is if cases are contained and people follow these 3 W's so that we have fewer cases. There's a question about any materials that have been referenced, whether it's the maximum gathering sign or the phone numbers. We can send those in an email to everybody who registered. Here's another question. Where do hotels fall under the current gathering order? And then there's another one about breweries and wineries who also host special events.
Yeah, so hotels fall under the same guidance. Like it's 10 people inside, 25 people outside. If they have multiple spaces, multiple rooms, regardless of the size of the room, they could put 10 people in different rooms. I'm trying to find that question about breweries.
It says, what about breweries and wineries who host special events? And then the same question, it says, are the rules different for Madison County?
Yeah, so the rules, we're in this area, we're exactly aligned with the state guidance, so that Madison County, as well as all the other counties in the state, have that guidance. No county can be less restrictive than the state in their baseline guidance, but counties have the sovereignty to be more restrictive in any aspect. So the rules might be different for Madison, but if they are, they would only be more restrictive. So breweries and wineries who don't qualify as restaurants are also subject to the same guidance. So if it's a breweries, we're allowed to operate with an amendment to the order with as long as they have food trucks on site under restaurant guidance. So that was the 50% capacity. Wineries, I imagine would be the same as long as they have the food truck on site to operate under that restaurant guidance. But those places that are just pure venues have to remain closed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's a question that I'd also kind of like to chime in on. It says that we're under a lot of pressure from our clients, and I know that that's true for any business that's customer facing right now. And they say, can we have a wedding industry specific announcement by the county or the CVB after the governor speaks next week so we can share that with them? They are all trying to find a way around the rules, and lots of folks are in states that are wide open. I would say that as a starting point, I think the county has some very good documents that can be posted and shared with the rules. I agree with you that there could be something that's maybe more narrative and very explicit. And I'm going to commit that, yes, we could work together with the county to provide that. And another thing that has come up in other discussions is whether it's helpful to have something that can be that is very governmental, that can be posted in like public areas, like downtown on sidewalks. And, I'd like to hear some feedback from industry and businesses, whether you think that would be helpful, just as another layer to say kind of like, declared by Buncombe County, you must wear a mask in public areas, you must be 6 feet apart. And I think that we have some good signage available that just needs to be blown up and posted somehow so that it's reinforcing that. So I'm anxious to hear from any of you on the call whether you think that would be beneficial. And we would be happy to, provide some resources behind printing those in larger formats and helping them to be available.
And thanks, Stephanie. And also, I agree, we can make that. I don't imagine we'd write it specifically into the local order, but what we have done is at each phase, we've done a news announcement, community update on Facebook Live and WLOS explaining it. We also create signage and materials to explain the difference between the phases. So what I can tell you guys is that when we go to whatever the next phase is, whatever it is, and we create those documents and do that, I can address through those in some way wedding industry, maybe as entertainment venues, but I'll find a way to make that very clear so you can reference it in the documents.
And we've done some things early on when everything was closed except hotels, and we wrote some materials that were vetted by an attorney that could be given to guests because they had to vet people for the explicit purpose of only essential travel. And so I think we could help to provide something that could be sent in an email or posted on a website that's sort of written in consumer facing terms. Kathy, are you on board for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's very, I'm sure, and I know this because both of my daughters got married within 1 year, just a couple of years ago. And I know how hard it is to try to plan an event like this. And this makes it that much more complex. One of the questions that has come up is, do the same gathering requirements apply if the event is at a private home?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so that mass gathering guidance applies everywhere. So again, the ceremony, no restrictions. They can have 100, they can have 1,000 people at their ceremony following the state guidance. Wouldn't recommend that, but there's specifically no cap on size. But afterwards, it moves to the mass gathering guidance, which is, it's kind of sits in place everywhere. I did see a question about venues are telling clients that staff do not count towards the mass gathering totals. I'm gonna have to do research on that because I know this is where the state guidance I think is a little contradicts itself. I think their guidance for how they determine emergency maximum occupancy and 50% occupancy for restaurants and retail was slightly different. So I'll have to do some reading into that and clarify that. But I think I saw something. I have to spend some time finding it back when we went to phase 2 that for restaurants, which is what they would be operating under, it counts as capacity, but you could use the entire square footage of the space, not just the serving space. But I'll look into that and I'll get an answer back to Explore.
Okay. I'd like to take a little commercial break from the chat, and so we'll have time to come back to some additional questions before we close, and introduce Beth McKinney from the Explore Asheville team.
Hey everybody, I wanted to chime in and just say hello. I am the wedding sales manager here at the CVB. I know many of you on this call. I feel deeply for many of you on this call and everything that you've been through these last few months. My role, I just wanted to share really quickly what my role is here. I communicate with hundreds of couples who are either considering Asheville for a wedding or who already have something planned here, and primarily help them find lodging, overnight group lodging for their wedding guests coming to town, then also connect them to wedding service providers like yourselves. So I would love to hear from you as you're kind of figuring things out for your own businesses, hear what you're implementing, changes that you're implementing for these COVID weddings. I'm hoping that, just kind of based on the wedding couples that I'm working with, that we're going to have a really awesome year in 2021. There's still some optimistic couples that are planning to get married in 2020. But hang in there. I know it's been really tough, and feel free to connect with us in any way that would make sense, whether it's about our services or what we can do moving forward in the wedding industry. My contact information is on the screen. And if you email weddings@exploreasheville.com, that goes directly to me. And I'll also plan to follow up after this call with an email to everyone, just sharing again what our services are here for your couples, and hopefully connect with you in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Fletch, do you see the question from Tara about clearing up space requirements for outside spaces? She says they have clients who have 65 guests but are in a huge field, and it's difficult telling them that only 25 guests are allowed without any official word.
Yeah, so great question. One we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out ourselves. So I can give you kind of what the state's done for precedents and some other areas, but think again, like they say they have 65 guests, and you say, oh, but we've got 4 acres or whatever. Really, where are the guests going to be? Are they going to be spread out over half an acre, or are they going to be consolidated? But I can tell you what the state's done for sports, such as like a soccer complex with a bunch of soccer fields, is they said 25 people per field. And then if their fields are side by side, each field has a 25 set limit for the teams and then and spectators. So It's that sports guidance is specific guidance that was enumerated in an addition, separate document from the state. I haven't seen that for general mass gathering guidance or for event venues. And I understand why it's a hard conversation to have. We can reach out to the state and ask them if that would apply to that. We can reach out to the state and ask them if that same kind of logic can apply to a big like farmland that they'd use on soccer fields. I don't know what they'll say, or it usually takes them about a week to get back to us, but I'll look into that. But as we read the mass gathering guidance, it doesn't make any differentiation about what kind of size it is. It just says 25 people together outside.
Fletch, it seems to me like that would be really productive because we have so many beautiful venues here that are outdoors and are very spacious. And I think it would be helpful for everyone if they could receive some guidance on, here are ways to make that work.
Yeah. So I'll reach out to the state with that specific question. Again, in the past, it's taken us about a week to hear back from the state on these kind of questions. They're probably particularly busy right now because they're getting ready for changes early next week. But as I interpret the guidance now, there's no exception for the 25 people outside, regardless of size. But it does say if you have different spaces, so however you would on your own determine what your spaces are, if you have separate spaces, delineations for those areas, you could probably use 25 people for each of those, depending on size. But again, getting away from the guidance, getting away from reading between the lines and all this stuff, please keep in mind the fundamental reason we're doing this is to mitigate transmission. And so think again, if you have 65 people and an acre and a half or whatever it is, really think about, are those 65 people going to be spread over that whole area that entire time, or are they really going to be cramped into one corner? Just think through that.
What I heard
what I think I'm saying right now is if you can delineate multiple spaces, which is in the governor's order, you can have multiple groups of 25 at this 6 foot distance. That's your parameter, 6 foot distancing per family or per people. So whatever that 1,000 square feet basically per each one, probably more than that. Whatever that math works out to. But then but now I'll follow up from the state for more clarification on that.
So it sounds to me like one of the bigger opportunities that have been clarified during this call is that if you have separate rooms, that's a great opportunity. And if you have outdoor spaces that can be delineated maybe through different tent setups or maybe through split rail fencing or maybe through something, and people are assigned to stay in those spaces, that might be an opportunity that would help to accommodate some of these larger group sizes and retain the spirit of this order to protect public safety. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right. And again, I have to caveat everything I say. Early next week, I don't think stuff's going to change, but we might get indication, a heads up that stuff will change. So my guidance I'm giving you now might be different by the end of next week.
And Eleanor's asking that it would be helpful to have a one sheet on the rules for each county, since many people work in different counties. And I think you could just reiterate that the rules are the same for everybody, right?
Yeah. So the rules, the documents, we have them posted on buncombecounty.org. If you go to our COVID page, we have the state executive order number 141, which put us in the phase 2 on May 22nd. And we have the frequently asked questions document that helps you interpret that. I'm pretty sure, I don't know this positively, but I think Buncombe County is the only county in the region that goes beyond this, is more restrictive than the state. So if you go by that state guidance, that's pretty much going to be the guidance for all the counties. And in Buncombe County, we're not more restrictive in these aspects. So it would be the same guidance for everyone.
And
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to also piggyback on, Beth posted and saying that, planners, would love to hear. So, and we would like to know, when you have figured out strategies that are compliant with these guidelines, please tell us. And, we would like to help promote what you're doing and, the innovative solutions that you're finding so that, 2020 can still continue to, book some business.
This is Kathy again. And Rick asks, he says, we are doing our best to communicate what is expected of guests. But what if, despite the guidelines we are providing, guests choose not to comply? And that also sounds very familiar with an email I got last week saying, who is ultimately responsible? Is it the wedding party, the bride and groom, or is it the wedding planner? And so there's some real confusion over, how to navigate that.
Yeah, it's the whole face covering issue has been very tricky for us as well. I can tell you from a order standpoint, currently in Buncombe County, you have to wear masks in indoor commercial spaces. But when that order was written, it was specifically designed and through the language of the county commissioners to be an unenforced order. So basically, it was a symbolic gesture to say how important wearing masks are. What we've told local community business owners is that they're not responsible for trying to enforce that. They shouldn't be shouldn't feel the need to put themselves in that position, particularly if some people get grumpy or upset about it. But as far as who, I think from my small insight into this industry, you guys all maybe operate a little differently depending on whether you own the venue or you just kind of like participate in venues by bringing services there. And some places the marrying couple has more control. So it's hard to say who ultimately is responsible for that. I don't consider these ceremonies, the ceremonies themselves, to be indoor commercial services. And again, they're exempt from the entirety of that order. So I think for that part, it would be up to the families how they want to do masks. But as far as your staff working at those, they should be wearing masks. And then even I would recommend what the order states is, although they're exempt, it's still recommended they practice 3 W's of the mask, the distance, and the sanitation.
Kathy, do you see anything else that we've missed?
I'm looking here to see, let's see, we're almost out of time, but there was one question. It might be a Jessica question about cafeteria style serving versus buffet style.
I think I saw that earlier. So if by cafeteria style you mean that they're assigned servers serving, I think that's allowable. What we don't want is self-serve. So it kind of depends on whether, like if you think about a cafeteria like in high school where the serving ladies are serving you, through that barrier. I think, and Jessica Silver, if you're still on, if you want to weigh in there, that's acceptable. What we don't want is individual, because that way there's 3 or 4 people serving the entire party. What we don't want is to have 60, 100 people serving themselves through the buffet line. So does that clarify that?
Okay.
Hopefully for that person.
Yeah, we are at time. So I will take this opportunity to say thank you for everyone for tuning in. And I hope that this was helpful in clarifying these rules that are in place. I wish the situation was different, and I wish that there were more opportunities for all of you right now. But thank you for tuning in. Please stay in touch with us. If we can continue to help, we'll follow up with the items that have been identified during this meeting. Please stay in touch with Beth. She'll be communicating with you. We're happy to help host any of these discussions that you want on a variety of different topics. We really appreciate Fletch and Tim and Jessica for being a resource for us for this meeting and for many others that have happened over the last few weeks. I wanted to let you all know that we're hosting a webinar on a different topic tomorrow. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we'll be talking about the advertising and our plans for how to move towards reopening in July through the rest of the year, and the messaging that helps to support safe visiting in Buncombe County. We also are previewing some upgrades to exploreasheville.com that affects business listings and provides some really great new tools, and we'll be providing some training on how to take advantage of that. So hang in there, everybody. Let's hope that everybody's as safe as we can be and we start to see the case numbers go down so that there's a light at the end of this tunnel. So thanks for tuning in today. Be well, everyone. Thank you.